Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And every so often, the debate in this House amongst the political class in Australia becomes a little bit disconnected from reality, a little bit disconnected from what's going on in the actual community. It's hard to believe, I know, but it's true. And at the moment, there's something of a collective swoon that seems to have taken over the political class. Some of the members of the press gallery, love them as I do. Everyone is swooning for this new Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, and I can understand it. He is speaking in full sentences, and that is a welcome relief. It's a welcome change from his predecessor. It's less appealing how many sentences there are, even less appealing how many of those sentences are about himself, but we will adjust to that. But what this swoon hides is a real anxiety in the Australian community, a real anxiety in the Australian public. We're in the lead-up to Christmas at the moment, and in the lead-up to Christmas, Australian families, they do their Christmas shopping, they plan for the school holidays, they plan for what they're going to do on Christmas lunch, and those cost of living pressures really become front of mind around the kitchen table, around the dinner table when we're planning for this. And this anxiety is being fuelled by the actions of the new government, of the new Turnbull-led coalition government, fuelled by the constant attacks on weekend rates, fuelled by the secret plan to increase the GST by 50% that is being pursued by those opposite. The secret plan that was revealed in the Sydney Morning Herald this week after being denied by the Treasurer recently. But I've got a message for the Australian public. I've got a message for the people in this building, and I'll do something that I don't believe has been done before in this chamber. I'll quote Flavor Flav, and I'll say, don't believe the hype. Because when Malcolm Turnbull tells you that there's never been a more exciting time to be an Australian, well, I can tell you the Australian public are not excited about the prospect of a GST. Some may be resigned. There might be a bit of a feeling this is a fait accompli given the amount of talk that we're hearing from those opposite about it. But I say to the Australian public, this is not inevitable and we should fight it. Labor is taking a stand against those opposite secret plan to increase the GST by 50%. The public talk about a lack of resolution in politics sometimes, but Labor's resolution on the GST is clear. The GST is bad for small business, it's bad for everyday Australians, and it's unfair. The Prime Minister likes to say that there will be no tax reform from those opposite that will disadvantage the most vulnerable Australians. Well, again, I say don't believe the hype. This government has an appalling record when it comes to fairness. This government has an indefensible record when it comes to the most vulnerable Australians. And when we look at NatSem's modelling of a prospective GST, we find that a 15% GST applied to everything would cause people in the lowest 20% of income brackets, the vulnerable people that the Prime Minister talks about, to pay 7% more. People in the highest 20% income bracket would pay just 3% more of their income. A typical Australian family would be $5,000 worse off. It's a tax that targets the people who are least able to afford it. But we're told by those opposite that the PM would never do a tax increase that was unfair, that they would compensate people. But I say to the Australian public, do you trust your family budget with the coalition? This is from the same coalition, the same party, the same member sitting opposite that brought you the horror Abbott budget. Yes, right. The budget that the current Prime Minister, the member for Wentworth, Malcolm Turnbull, told Alan Jones, quote, "I support unreservedly and wholeheartedly every element in the budget, every single one." This was a budget that, according to NatSem, would make a couple with two kids in the lowest quintile of Australians 6.6% worse off, while a couple with two kids in the highest quintile 0.3% worse off. Does that sound fair to you? It doesn't sound fair to me. The other bizarre thing about what those opposite are proposing is that this GST, the secret plan to increase the GST by 50% being pushed by those opposite, seems to be the solution to every problem in Australia. So the Treasurer says we don't have a spending problem in Australia, we have a revenue problem. What they have opposite is a hype problem when it comes to the GST. So far, the coalition has said that a GST could pay for putting back the $80 billion in schools and hospital funding they've cut, cutting personal income tax, cutting the company tax, abolishing stamp duty on insurance, abolishing payroll tax, abolishing stamp duty, cutting fuel excise to abolish car rego fees, paying down the national debt. As I say, it's not a spending problem, it's a hype problem. And when it comes to hype, there is no bigger hype than the nonsense that's being spouted by the Treasurer about tax policy. He says opposite that when the coalition does tax reform, it reduces taxes. He says that you don't deal with revenue by jacking up taxes. That's the Labor way. Well, when you look at the data, I know that the Treasurer is not particularly good with numbers at the moment because he's still got the training wheels on, but even if we just look at the trajectory, the blue is the coalition, the red is Labor.
Order.
They go up under the coalition, they go down under the Labor Party. That's the facts. Don't believe the hype.